Good afternoon and welcome to the Landowner and Renewable Energy Transition webinar. I'm Fiona Roberts from the Hume Region Office of the Victorian Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action. You may also know us as DECA or previously DALP. We have a lot of information to share with you in the next 90 minutes. We have brought together government and industry experts to share their knowledge and a farmer from the Northeast to share their experiences with you. The purpose of this webinar is to provide information to help build your understanding about renewable energy developments and also help you know where to go for credible information in the future. This webinar is a collaboration with our Regional Agriculture Victoria colleagues who deliver the Energy Smart Farming Initiative, as well as our colleagues from the Loddon Mallee office of DECA. This webinar is being recorded and the recording, slides and resources referred to in this webinar will be posted on the Energy Smart Farming website. Before we get started, I will acknowledge the traditional owners whose countries we are joining this meeting from. I live and work on Yorta Yorta country. I also honour elders past and present and welcome elders and First Peoples who are joining this meeting today. So to get started, in this webinar, we will hear from our 6 panellists and then we will have a Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. Please add your questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will be using the chat function as a notice board throughout the session. You can view that at the bottom of your screen also. We have a team working in the background collating questions, and this will help get as many questions as possible to our panellists and also avoid any double ups. We understand that the renewable energy transition can be challenging and it affects us all in different ways. We value respectful conversations and are looking forward to constructive questions and answers today. I would like to thank our 6 panellists for supporting the webinar and for generously donating time out of their busy schedules. We are aiming to cover quite a range of information in this webinar in the 90 minutes, so we will get started. Our first panellist will set the scene of the renewable energy transition in Victoria. Eliza Ginnivan is the Manager for Regional Engagement of the Victorian Transmission Investment Framework and is part of DECA's VicGrid team. Eliza is born, bred and lives in Northeast Victoria and has a deep connection to the beautiful Indigo Valley. Eliza will give us the what and why of the renewable energy transition we are seeing in Victoria. Thanks, Eliza.
Thank you very much for that, Fiona, and hello to everyone. Yes, as Fiona said, the purpose of my presentation today is to give you an overview of the renewable energy transition. So what we mean by energy transition, that's the changes required to transform our economy from one that's powered by fossil fuels, such as oil, coal, oil and gas, to one that's powered by clean energy sources. So I'll be setting the stage for the rest of today's presentations. For me, it's really important to understand the bigger macro level forces at play so I can make sense of what's driving the changes that I'm seeing on the ground in my regional community. My hope is that by the end of today's presentation, you'll understand how the energy transition impacts what you're seeing on your region and maybe on your farm. So before I get underway, just a quick introduction to the organisation that I work for, which is VicGrid. So VicGrid is a Victorian government agency that is responsible for planning and developing the new infrastructure that will transport energy generated by renewables to the electricity grid. So VicGrid is putting in place a long-term plan to make sure that there's the right infrastructure in the right place at the right time to support the energy transition. We carry out this work in 3 ways. Policy, we give advice to government about how the rules that should govern how energy is generated and transmitted in Victoria. Planning, we plan for Victoria's future energy needs through modelling and consulting with communities. And projects, so we oversee the procurement of new transmission projects. So that underway, let's get into what the energy transition involves. So energy, it powers every aspect of our lives: heating and cooling, lights and kitchens appliances, hospitals, schools, the fact that I can speak to you now from Melbourne, and that I can live and work in Beechworth, the kids' favourite devices. It's absolutely essential for everything we do. So the energy we use comes from different sources. In Victoria, most of our energy comes from burning brown coal at the power stations in the Latrobe Valley. This energy is delivered through Victoria's electricity grid. So this is a network of generators, high voltage power lines, substations, and lower voltage lines across the state. This was built originally mainly to transfer electricity from the centralised coal-fired power stations to end users, essentially in a one-way direction, emanating out. However, within the next 10 years, these coal-fired power stations will be phased out, and in the 2030s and 2040s, Victoria will move to full connection to renewable energy generation. Unlike our current state in the past, this generation will be spread out across the state, and much of it is going to be concentrated in designated renewable energy zones. So let's get into a bit more detail. Next slide, please. So relying on coal to meet our energy needs is a short-term solution. Coal-fired power is becoming increasingly unreliable. These facilities were built a long time ago and they're really difficult to maintain. They're also the main source of Victoria's greenhouse gas emissions, contributing up to 70% of our total emissions. And there are higher costs with maintaining aging power stations, and we know where higher costs end up. But the main thing that's driving the urgency of the energy transition is that these coal-fired power stations are closing down faster than expected. So since 2012, more than 10 large coal-fired generators have closed across Australia, including Hazelwood in the Latrobe Valley. All of our coal-fired power stations are projected to close by 2038 across Australia. Yallourn in the Latrobe Valley, which supplies 22% of our state's power, is slated to close in mid-2028. That's only 4 years away. And our largest coal-fired power station, Loy Yang A, will close in 2035, and that's a decade earlier than we had been working to. This means we have just over a decade to replace these major power sources that have powered our state for many, many decades with alternatives. So next slide, please. So our new energy system, it's moving from fossil fuels, which is coal, gas and oil, to renewable energy, sun and wind. In Victoria, we have the goal that by 2035, our electricity grid will be powered by 95% renewable energy. This is part of our commitment to net zero emissions by 2045. Currently, renewable energy powers 38% of our energy consumption, so that is a big, ambitious goal. During the same time, though, our electricity demand is going up. By 2035, Victoria's energy use will have increased by 40% or more. This is driven mostly by the electrification of homes, businesses, and vehicles as EVs come up. So it's happening really quickly. If we can't build renewable energy generation and supporting transmission lines soon, we'll see spikes in electricity prices and unreliable electricity supply when those coal-fired power stations retire in about a decade. And transmission lines, those significant pieces of infrastructure that are needed to transfer the generation to the use, take years to plan and construct. So there's a lot of urgency to act quickly to keep the lights on in Victoria. So next slide, please. So what does this transition look like? So we're going to need significant new renewable energy generation and storage capacity to replace these coal-fired power stations. This slide shows, you can see at the top, are the types of renewable energy generation transported by transmission lines in the middle, down to the types of uses and storage at the bottom. So this new energy system, it's going to require a decentralized and diversified portfolio of generation types. You can see at the top there, we've got hydroelectricity, solar farms, grid-scale batteries, onshore and offshore wind. Much of the energy that we generate in the new phase will be used closer to where it's generated. And with transmission, the middle poles and wires you can see there, We also need to upgrade the transmission network to connect these new renewable energy sources. There's going to be a lot more energy coming in, and this will be needed to connect all the different sources of generation to homes and businesses across the state. We also need more storage solutions such as batteries and pumped hydro. Some battery options are down the bottom of this slide. So batteries are really important because they charge when more electricity is being generated than being used. And then they deliver the energy back into the grid later when there's not enough wind or sunshine to meet the demand for power. So it's a really crucial part of maintaining steady and reliable energy supply. Under the energy transition, household level technologies are becoming more common. So that's rooftop solar, household batteries and EVs. Microgrids and neighbourhood batteries will also boost energy security, especially for more isolated communities. So let's look at then the energy transition on a map. Next slide, please. So it's a bit of a busy map. I'll let you absorb that while I'm speaking, but you can see on this map, it shows proposed and existing generation, transmission and storage projects. Just want to call out the yellow bolded icons are new transmission, which will be required. And you might see offshore wind down there offshore in Gippsland, which is currently under quite significant development. So as we move from this centralised energy system to a decentralised one over the next decade, this energy transition is going to be visible across Victoria. So we really want to build the right amount of energy infrastructure in the right places at the right time. We want to make sure that we're not building more than is required to meet our needs, because we'd like to minimise the impact on communities and on land use, as well as keep energy bills down. So that's really important to be modelling and planning this in a centralised, coherent way. In Victoria, what VicGrid is working on, and the aim is that we will have energy generation concentrated in renewable energy zones. So these are spots across the state where there is really great capacity and opportunity for generation, and that minimises the impact on other land use. So you can see from this map, the generation is spread out across the state. Many regions are going to be involved in the transition in some way. You'll probably have come to this seminar because you have started to see that yourself with your own eyes. You've heard about it from your neighbours. There might be prospecting and development phases of generation, wind and solar farms, transmission projects, construction and operation. Some other factors of the energy transition that I think are important to call out are the use of land for generation, storage and transmission lines. We're going to need to build a lot over the next decade. Where will it go, and what's the arrangements under which that is built? Renewable energy offers diversified income streams for landholders who host a project. That could be a really interesting source of income and spreading risk, particularly I know when farming can be up and down as year on year. There's also considerations about the different type of use of land and making sure that our conservation and environment is protected. Renewable energy energy transition comes with the possibility for region-wide investment and economic opportunities associated with the build-out, including local jobs and sustainable economic growth. We've also got an interest in making sure that the benefits of the renewable energy transition are shared with significantly impacted neighbours and host communities. So that VicGrid has been working on a plan for developing the community benefits plan, which is the government's proposal to do just that, taking into account the fact that previously regional communities have borne a lot of the brunt of transmission and generation projects and are seeing fewer of the costs. The community benefits plan is a proposal to balance that out. And then there's also working with traditional owners to make sure that the transition can bring long-term economic prosperity and independence to Aboriginal communities. This is an ongoing project. And finally, that regional communities get a say in how the energy transition looks and feels and what it means for communities. In my job at VicGrid, we're working to the Victorian Transmission Investment Framework, which is a plan that's just been shared in the chat. And that sets out really the government's commitment to a way of engaging with communities that is early, deep, and meaningful, and it's meant to bring people along at an early stage, so it's not just the last people who are consulted. So from my perspective in closing, I believe the renewable energy transition offers a once-in-a-generation opportunity for regional development for the community that I live in and the towns and regions that we love. It needs to be done in the right way. And I think that knowledge is power. And I think this is a really great opportunity for you to ask your questions and get some answers that are going to help you as landowners in the transition. So I hope this has given you a better sense of what's driving the changes in the transition and you feel a bit more equipped about what's coming next. Great. Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks, Eliza. Thanks for a great presentation and for setting the scene and explaining how the transition to renewable energy will roll out across Victoria. Please put any questions for Eliza in the Q&A chat function at the bottom of your screen. Now, I would like to introduce you to Paul Stark, who is a Policy and Farmer Engagement Officer at Farmers for Climate Action. Farmers for Climate Action represent approximately 8,000 farmers across Australia, and they are also a member of the National Farmers Federation and Climate Action Network Australia. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Fiona, and thanks for having us along. If you want to go to the next slide. So I'm in Melbourne on Wurundjeri land, but I'm originally from Queensland, so I do have a bit of a Victorian perspective, but we're a national organisation, so we also bring landholder experience from around Australia as well. So I'm hoping to go through what we're hearing from some of our farmers and members, the community support for renewable energy, and then also how to ensure a more positive landholder experience. So what we're hearing from community, and we have done a lot of surveys and engagement with our members and farmers on this. So a lot of our members have said that lack of meaningful engagement has meant what should be a simple task has become far more complicated, created frustration in communities, and also driven some of the opposition that exists in communities today to renewable energy and transmission infrastructure. So some communities have been wanting upgrades to their transmission infrastructure for decades, but they won't benefit from this transmission lines which are being deployed in renewable developments, and those shows a clear lack of consultation there. There's also other issues which are arising, 1 kilometre development overlays, which means that some farms don't have the opportunity to build infrastructure which they need. And then there's also other concerns around fencing and what developers should be and should not do. Now, those concerns really stream from a lack of community consultation and positive consultation in which is required. And that shows that landholders' voices are sometimes not heard. And it's important that going forward that these are brought to light. So Farmers for Climate Action was really delighted to see the Dyer report. So that was released earlier this year, and this or late last year, and this highlighted all of these concerns which we've been hearing, and really highlighted to governments and policymakers, developers, everyone involved in their transmission, that communities want to be heard about the renewable energy transition. What we see is that governments are committed to implementing these. So renewable energy is a huge opportunity for farms and particularly for landholders around Australia and in Victoria. From maintaining farm profits, so there are approximately up to $40,000 per wind turbine per year some developers offer to farmers. That's an enormous amount of money. It provides farms with a diversified income stream, but also guaranteed payments. We know that farming, you don't get the same weather every single day, and climate change is just going to make it more difficult. So having a dedicated revenue stream from renewable energy is a way to ensure that your business can continue to be profitable into the future, but also that you can continue to stay on your farm and you have money coming in. And so if you want to go to the next slide, there is a lot of support for renewable energy on farms. So some of these include, large-scale solar farm projects, wind farm projects, but also, across Australia, farmers are taking up renewable energy. But hosting provides one of those diversified streams. So in a recent survey, which Farmers for Climate Action did, which is on the next slide. Yeah, great. We surveyed over 300 farmers, and they have overwhelmingly said that they support renewable energy in Australia, so 92%. But also, they've said that 64% believe their communities are opposed or somewhat opposed to transmission projects in their region. What we've heard is that this opposition comes from a lack of understanding about what transmission lines are compared to traditional power lines, a lack of understanding about what the impacts will be, and a lack of understanding about where they will be and how they'll be built. So community voices need to be valued and need to be heard. But we've also heard that what we asked were, would you be open to hosting large-scale renewable energy projects on your farm? 52% of respondents said yes, that they would be. Also, 22% said they were unsure. And whether this not being able to make a decision yet comes from a lack of, not understanding how the project will impact on their farm, whether it comes from a lack of understanding about what the project will be. This shows that there is not a large amount of opposition in communities, that farmers view the positives of renewable energy, but they need to have their voices heard and to be consulted actively on it. The community also asked what would make communities more supportive of large-scale renewable energy. So some ideas were community ownership, consultation, which was another large, over 50% responded saying consultation would increase and make communities more supportive. We saw that higher payments for hosting farmers were lower, with about 35%, and payments to impacted neighbours were at 34%. Community benefits programs were 44% as well, and direct financial incentives to people impacted in the area was 34%. What this survey insights showed was that particularly farmers and regional communities, the cost is a factor, but it's not the make or break factor. Consultation and clear community benefit is more important. And so if we go to the next slide, how to ensure a better landholder experience. What we have known from our work and engaging with farmers, our members and rural community is that building social license, so good understanding of the project, its benefits and how it will impact on community, engaging in constructive and positive consultation, fostering understanding and education, improving long-term community benefit sharing, addressing the energy inequities in regional communities, and better land use and network planning are all positive actions that can, need to be and are being undertaken by governments to ensure better landholder experience. For example, the VicGrid map just before showed great use of land use and network planning. The energy inequities in communities, there are a number of factors which are helping and a number of groups advocating to remove these inequities. Community benefit sharing is a positive which is occurring at the moment, and there are examples around Victoria of communities which have brought renewable energy into their communities and used it as a positive. So there's cooperatives and other examples. So Farmers for Climate Action views renewable energy as a massive opportunity for farms to secure their long-term profitability, to build resilience, but also to make sure that they are a part of the transition and that they're reducing their emissions. So we have further information, if you go to the next slide, on our website about hosting renewables on farm. And this is a curated list which directs you to other resources. But it also shows that, there is information out there and that it just needs to be brought to light and presented to farmers. So I did want to say thank you for your time. I hope this has been really insightful and that it gives you all a better understanding of our position on this, but also shows the opportunities that exist in farms and what landholders value about renewable energy.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for your presentation and sharing what FCA are hearing from farmers. Yeah, it's very interesting. So now I'd like to go to our next panelist. Clean Energy Council is the peak body for renewable energy industry. And we have Nathan Hart, who is a policy officer at the CEC, to outline their work with promoting best practice behaviours in the industry. Thanks, Nathan, for being part of this webinar. Over to you.
Thanks so much, Fiona, and hello, everyone. It's really great to be here today and talk to you about this really important issue. So I'm dialing in from the lands of the Wurundjeri people and just acknowledge elders past and present. And the purpose of my presentation is really to build your confidence and knowledge when developers are knocking on your door, you know, things to look for, things to engage with and things like that. So as mentioned, the CEC or Clean Energy Council, we're the peak body for renewables or the clean energy industry. We've got 1,000 members, everyone from, you know, wind, onshore wind, offshore wind, storage, renewable hydrogen, the whole ecosystem. Next slide, please. So this is where I grew up as a kid in Benalla. It is in northeastern Victoria. We had 10 acres there. There were no other homes around that little yellow box. It was the only thing there. And this was in the 80s and 90s, and it was a real time of centralisation where a lot of industry and workers left the region. It's one of the reasons that my family kind of packed up and moved to Melbourne. And the energy transition is a real opportunity to reimagine our regions and re-energise the rural regions. I wonder that if we were going through the same thing today, that perhaps instead of moving to Melbourne, we just would have put solar panels on our 10 acres and diversified our income through that. But I think it highlights that industry really needs to be meeting landholders and communities where they're at, need to understand their challenges and look to add value where they can. Next slide, please. And one way that they can do that, and this is the most common kind of co-use practice in Australia, is what we call agri-grazing or agrivoltaics, as it's kind of academically called. And there are really mutual benefits to the landholder, developers, and of course, stock. Benefits to the landholder include drought-proof your income. You've got increased vegetation from the panels as they collect moisture overnight and then drop, and vegetation grows under that. That creates healthier and fatter stock, meaning you can get more for them at market. And panels create microclimate and reduce wind, so it can help protect against erosion. The benefits of stock is that they are safer. Obviously, there's fencing around the projects that reduces predation. There's a lot of shade in summer and protects them from frost, rain and hail. There's benefits to the developer as well. It does cost about 5% more to develop and plan for aggregating, but they recover this through the decrease in mechanical slashing. So they have to keep the grass really low to reduce their bushfire risk. But there are kind of things that they need to think for in planning. They need to plan around fencing, watering, mustering. There are engineering considerations in the type of panel tracking that you use. There are contract considerations, who leases the land to who, insurance considerations around risk. But a good developer will be able to explain all of this to you. I'm pretty sure that this picture is actually from Glenrowan West, and we've got Gail speaking later. So apologies, Gail, if I stole a bit of your thunder with my presentation, but I just thought it's such a great example. So experienced developers will be able to walk you through all of this. Next slide, please. Just before I play this video, I think it's important to talk about the scale that we're seeing. Obviously, if you're in a proposed renewable energy zone, you will be seeing some changes. You're obviously having a lot of developers knock on your door. It's really important that only a small percentage of those will actually stack up economically and will actually get built. So there may be a sense that there's a lot of prospecting and a lot of development happening. But to put these numbers in perspective, if we were to build 50 gigawatts of solar, so that's the entire size of the national electricity market, it would require less than 0.016 of Australia's total land, or in agricultural land, that is 0.027%. So I don't want to take away from this sense of change that is happening in regional areas, but it's important to put the big picture in perspective, that the land that solar panels or wind farms will actually take up is really quite small in the big picture of Australia. So thank you very much. I'll proceed with the video.
Hey Gus, here mate, good boy, stop. So I'm Greg Fowler, a mixed cropping farmer from Kerrang in northern Victoria. We've been farming in the area 130 years. We've decided to go into renewables just to diversify part of the farm, and we're still heavily into the farming, but yeah, just part of it's gone to renewable. You know, I also run sheep in the solar, which helps on the maintenance. It saves a lot of mowing and keeps the grass down, and yeah, just they do well and like the shade under the panels.
Hi, my name's Tim Dixon. This is our family land and we're moving into renewables. We've got a battery being built on here. It's great to be part of the sustainable energy solution. The battery itself, it's going to be a stabilising battery for the lines here. It's going to hold a lot of the energy produced by the renewable projects in the area.
My name's Neil. I'm the site manager here at the solar farms and I love it. Tim and Greg are the landowners here. The solar farm gives them a consistent income where farming doesn't. In times of drought, the sun still shines.
The decision to go down this way was initiated by Dad in partnership with Edify Energy. There's a number of reasons we went down this path. One is that we see renewables as being a solution for Australia moving forward. And the second part is it's an ongoing revenue stream for our family.
Yeah, when we decided to do it, I was a bit worried what Dad would think of it, all that years of farming and family farm, but yeah, thought it was a good opportunity.
Thanks so much. I love that video. Over to the next slide, please. So the Clean Energy Council has a best practice charter. The best practice charter is a commitment for 58 odd signatories designed to clearly communicate the standards that they will uphold in development. It's a commitment to engage respectfully with communities in which they plan to operate, to be sensitive to environmental and cultural values, and make a positive contributions to the regions in that they operate. Again, 58 signatories there. And those 10 commitments are really the entire life cycle of the project, from the moment that they're knocking on the door to 20, 40, 60 years time to when they're decommissioning the project. So I think a real powerful question that you can ask developers that they're knocking on your door, the first question should be, are you a signatory to the CEC Best Practice Charter? We are bringing in a reporting requirement to this. So from July, that portal will open from the 58 signatories. They'll have until the end of August to report on how they're meeting those 10 commitments. So if you get someone who knocks on your door and you know they're from Glenrowan or Acciona or something like that, from October, you'll be able to go to our website and have a look at their report or their submission on how they're meeting those 10 commitments. And we're continually evaluating those 10 commitments. Are they fit for purpose at the moment? Do they need to be updated? And things like that. Next slide, please. And we've kind of touched on benefit sharing already, but community benefit sharing schemes are essentially a way for a project to share the benefits with the communities that they're hosting in. And their real focus among policymakers and legislators at the moment, for example, Victoria is currently considering a way to pool funds from projects. This will be really important in renewable energy zones where we have a lot of projects operating in the same area, and this will enable really legacy, a different scale of benefits to be delivered. The capacity investment scheme, a federal scheme that economically kind of underwrites projects, has a merit criteria around benefit sharing schemes. So to win kind of a capacity investment scheme funding contract, you need to have a really well-developed benefit sharing schemes. So the most common one is for benefit funds that are designed by the community for the community. So this will involve a community referent groups made up of community members, and they allocate funding to the community as they best see fit. There are also other models. There are neighbourhood benefit programs that develop like neighbouring properties. An example of that might be bulk purchase and installation of solar panels on neighbouring properties. There are sponsorship where you might sponsor a local sporting group or land care group or something like that. There's ways that you can prioritise jobs within the community and local procurement. Local procurement and jobs are really the best way that regions can benefit from the energy transition. And this is why it's so important that we have cross-government kind of planning and coordination. There's employment volunteerism, essentially where the project will volunteer their staff out to land care groups or different groups in the community and offer their staff. And then there's kind of innovative financing ways or co-equity, co-ownership models where members of the community actually own part of the project. And we're seeing more and more of that come out in Victoria. Next slide, please. Cool. I think it's important to understand the industry landscape. That you can kind of put this into three broad ways. There are developers, owners, and operators. Occasionally, you will have someone who does all three of these, but there's only a handful of companies who develop, own, and operate projects. It's often that entities or operators will develop a project, and these are the ones who are more commonly probably knocking on your doors, wanting to get kind of an option contract or something like that. Once they have that option, then they may sell that to someone who looks to develop a project. So I think another question you could be asking developers, do you intend to develop, own, and operate? Will you just develop it and then sell it? I think all of these kind of practices are reasonable, and we need all of these entities operating within the ecosystem to get the amount of projects that we built. But it's worthwhile being mindful of, as a landholder, that relationship might change, it might get passed on, and kind of being aware of who's going to have stewardship over that relationship from the developer side is a really important question. So next slide, please. I just want to point out that transmission and clean energy projects are handled very differently in kind of the regulatory and legislative space. I want to say that like all clean energy projects exist on land at the moment with explicit consent and support of that landholder. They're commercial negotiations between a developer and a landholder where the landholder wants to diversify the productivity of their land and provide a drought-proof income. Developers don't have access rights in the same way that transmission companies do, and absolutely no developer can ever force you to host a project or change your farming practices. You are in control of your land. Next slide. So just some really key questions there to recap. Do you intend to develop, own, and operate the project, being mindful of all of those different entities that kind of exist? Are you a signatory to the Clean Energy Council Best Practice Charter? And if you are, then from October this year, you'll be able to go and have a look and see how they're adhering to those 10 commitments. Do you have experience with agrivoltaics or agri-grazing, as we call it? And how will the project coexist with my land and farm? Are there dual land use practices? Where will fencing be? Where will water go? How do I muster things like that? And then how will the project deliver lasting benefits to my neighbours and community? Noting that you've all got reputations in the community that you operate in, and you want these projects to not just benefit you and drought-proof your land, but to benefit your neighbours and the entire community as well. And then if this is something that you're exploring with a developer, I think it would be great to go and visit a project, a wind farm or a solar farm. If you're in Victoria, the one in Glenrowan that Gail's about to talk to you with, I'm sure Gentari, the developer there, would be happy to have you along. Yeah, so please get out there and have a look at projects. They're really marvelous engineering feats and really delivering a lot for rural and regional Australia. I've got some resources in my next slide, which will be shared, I think, with the slide deck, but that's it for me. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Nathan, for explaining the role that the Clean Energy Council does in promoting best practice in the industry, and also for sharing some valuable tips. Please put any questions for Nathan in the Q&A function. Right, now I would like to introduce Jared Lenny. Jared is the Executive Officer in the Office of the Australian Energy Infrastructure Commissioner. The AEIC exists to support local community residents with their questions and concerns about wind farms, large-scale solar farms, energy storage facilities, and new major transmission projects. They do a very interesting range of work, and I encourage you to visit their website. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, Fiona, and good afternoon, everyone. It has just ticked to the afternoon. I'm joining from Melbourne, the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, but I grew up on the land of the Yorta Yorta on a dairy farm. So it's a great pleasure to be on the panel today and to hear everyone's presentations. We've already heard about a lot of fantastic resources and key issues for everyone to work through when they're considering or responding to a project in their community or on their land. So it's a great pleasure to be participating. I'm happy to move to our next slide. Just a very quick summary about the Office of the AEIC. The Commissioner was created initially in November 2015 as the Wind Farm Commissioner, and the inaugural appointment, Andrew Dyer, has only just retired this year. So an important independent role. The AEIC is appointed by the Minister and reports to Parliament. And since 2015, the work of the Commissioner has expanded from that initial wind farm focus, dealing with community inquiries, project transparency, and promoting best practice on wind farms, to also include solar, large-scale storage, which could be batteries or pumped hydro, and more recently, helping communities with questions about new transmission projects. So that work experience has just this year ticked over 1,000 individual cases where we've provided information, support, referral assistance to community members who may be landholders or neighbours or other residents in relation to new projects. And in terms of the resources that are available on our website, and I know there'll be a bit of a plethora of resources, but I would encourage everyone to take a look at the Appendix A to our 2022 annual report, which has pretty much the collected wisdom of the previous Commissioner on all of the potential issues and opportunities that arise across all of those renewable energy projects. That case handling work, as I say, is very much the core of our unique perspective across Australia. So it's a great resource to dig into that annual report from 2022. Our 2023 annual report is going to be tabled in Commonwealth Parliament very shortly, we hope. So we're looking forward to making that available as well. The other key link there on that slide, which will be in the resources, is the guide to contacting us if you do have a question about a new project in your neighbourhood or on your own land. We provide a step through of what sort of support we can provide. As I say, it's a voluntary process. The Commissioner doesn't have any formal powers, but it's really an opportunity for both the proponent of a project and the concerned residents to articulate the concerns and the facts in any one case, to look for an opportunity to have a constructive, meaningful dialogue. I know that's been mentioned already, and that's really the most important thing, to get people talking to each other. And we focus on what can be done to achieve a practical outcome with any inquiry or information request or complaint. So if we do skip over to the next slide, of all of the many great things you could read, which include in other states, the Queensland Farmers Federation's Renewable Landholder Toolkit and the New South Wales Farmers Association's Renewable Energy Guideline, I would strongly encourage you to take a look at the considerations for landholders before entering commercial agreements that's on our website. This is one of the key documents that aggregates the experiences of the office in helping landholders and engaging with the different kinds of commercial agreements that a developer might approach you with. As Nathan suggested, a good question might be to ask them about their signatory status to the Clean Energy Council's best practice charter. Whether or not they could provide you with this document could also be an early indicator of the developer's bona fides. It's not too long. It's one cup of tea, I think, and a biscuit, and it really works through the types of agreements that a renewable energy project developer might put on the table, things to consider, such as particular clauses around exclusivity or confidentiality, opportunities to negotiate the dispute resolution mechanisms that might be appropriate for the particular agreement. And it also walks through the life cycle of the project, things to consider as a landholder during construction, for example, which can be a very busy time in a project, as well as crystallising those ongoing farm or land use considerations that you may have. That is, again, also on our website, and highly encourage that document as a key resource. If you read it and you think actually there's other issues that we could include, please get in touch with the office. We're always keen to make sure that we're getting all of the latest insights from everyone's experiences. If we do turn over to the next slide, thank you, Sarah. I really just wanted to keep it focused today from the office's perspective. And I think for me, that's these three suggestions. Always seek facts from credible sources. That's the most important thing to do, is to make sure that you're dealing with the problems and the situations in a situation as credibly as possible. And that includes getting help. One of the things that the considerations document strongly encourages is to ensure that you're getting independent legal advice or business financial advice as part of the process. And very much industry expectation is that developers will reimburse you for reasonable costs for independent help. So that's an important practical tip, I think, to be aware of if you're in the position of considering a response from a developer. And I think the final one I flagged here is to be prepared. Even in this fast-moving energy transition period, you can expect a reasonably long journey and some uncertainty if there is a project proposed to participate in your neighbourhood or on your land. And I think it's important to remember, as Nathan flagged before, that not every project and not every part of every project does become a reality. That's just the nature of a project being developed and the commerciality being tested. So it may be that you're initially offered participation in a project and its scale changes and it reduces the benefits to you. So there's always the challenge of uncertainty over time. So be prepared for that. One other thing I'd also flag, of course, is to take care of your neighbours. Keep an eye on your opportunities to encourage the developer to be developing those neighbourhood projects, and be prepared for the questions that you may get as well. Final slide is the other resources and links for us. As I say, the Appendix A, Chapter 1 on host landholder negotiations is good reading. But there's also sections in that appendix on community engagement in general and neighbour matters in particular. That's probably all I wanted to say as part of the panel, but happy to participate in the Q&A and looking forward, if you do have any questions, to hearing them through our inbox or 1-800 number.
Thanks, Jared. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Jared. That's yeah, very interesting and yeah, very helpful service that the AEIC provide. I also would like to recommend the documents in that they're written in plain English, so easy to digest. So don't be put off in dipping into the resources that Jared's outlined. So now I'd like to introduce Gail Lee, who owns a farming property in Glenrowan West that is partially leased as a solar farm. Gail, I'll throw over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Look, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. We started back in 2018, just in January 2018, we had 4 companies approach us within 6 weeks, sorry, for the establishment of a solar farm. We had absolutely no idea as to what to do, who to talk to. But we were fortunate we could find a gentleman who acted as a consultant for us to help us work our way through what was quite a confusing start to this process. From our point of view and what we know now, looking back, it's the first thing you need to do is to get yourself some good advice. It's an exciting and confusing time when people come knocking on your door with grand schemes and big checkbooks. But building on what previous speakers have said, you really need to take your time. If there's one company there, there's probably some more around, so I don't think you're going to miss out just because the first one, you take your time with the first one. So just take your time, certainly get some legal advice and some accounting advice, because it can make a difference, a lot of difference to you in terms of your ongoing income. It's okay to say, you know, this is an ongoing income for your farm, but you've got to make sure it works for you in terms of your taxation and legal requirements. Just remember when you're dealing with these big companies, and I appreciate the advice given by the people that have spoken previously, but you're the one, this is your farm and your asset, and nobody looks after it like you do. So you need to make sure that you are happy with what's happening. These big companies are coming and they are looking after their interests, so make sure you look after yours. Sell or lease, that's if you decide to play in this field, but the next decision is whether you sell or lease, and it depends on, you know, people's personal preference. We chose to lease because some of this land's been in the Lee family for 150 years, and we believe that the value is in the land, and we chose lease. You've got to work out what the risks and benefits of that are. You know, we have a lease that says that the solar farm can walk away from here with 12 months notice. So you have to work out which way you want to go. You need to really, as you progress through the process, and as previous speakers have spoken, not all projects get up. There are some issues about some developers wanting to land bank, in that they want you to sign an exclusivity agreement for a period of time, and then they will sit on that land and hopefully sell it on to a developer later on. So just be aware there are some, it doesn't always transform to a project. It's important, once you've decided to go down the lease track, to get some of the real details sorted out early. Talking about the money, you know, how much area are they talking, the timeline, and please get this information in writing. We've seen some examples here where people are quite confused with getting phone calls about somebody promising this, and then there's been another promise from somebody else the next day. So make sure you get it in writing. When you get to the point of doing the option to lease and the lease, you must be aware that, again, you know, Jared just spoke about developers and contractors and O&M people. We had this situation where our developer, we chose to go with a company based in Australia. We had 3 internationals and 1 Australian company. We chose to go with the Australian company, not because they offered the most dollars, but because we felt we could work with them. You need to, once they developed the project, once they did all the DNA work and had it as a saleable development, that was sold to a German company. And the German company in turn appoint a contractor, an EPC contractor, an engineering procurement and construct contractor, and they were actually Americans. So you can see that they didn't really have too many ideas about Australian agriculture. And if I was really honest, I'd say they didn't care a thing about Australian agriculture too. They just, you're going to run sheep under this, it'll all happen, it's fine. So there's some real things that you need to look at, and as early as possible in terms of your project. What type of solar equipment is to be used? And fortunately, our solar farm has single trackers. That is one row of panels, one motor. So they turn with just one motor. Other solar farms in this area have dual trackers. So there's a link between a metal bar between two rows of panels. This is a real trap. It's too low for sheep to get under. Sheep try to get over and can get stuck on it. There's also the issue about having quite a number of rows of panels linked together, and they have a cog mechanism to turn the panels, and your sheep can get their wool caught, and again, they're there. They die there, basically. Just to go through some practical farming issues, you know, who has the right to graze the stock under the panels? And discussion about liability for stock damage to panels. We've not had an issue with this, but it's something that needs to be looked at. Impact of the movement of stock, positioning of gates in security fences. We've got some gates that go nowhere, but they were designed in the US, and once it's under the contract, they won't change them, basically. Are they planning to fill in the dams? The ability to fence into smaller blocks. Grazing in really large blocks is difficult, so is mustering. Water for firefighting, control of weeds, impact of damage, impact on drainage. You know, how do you, they take out drainage lines that have been on the farm for years, will impact you for years to come. To clarify the access points and things on your farm, make sure that you know where they're going to come in, go out, those sorts of things. And in terms of dealing with the developers at the actual construction, don't expect the impossible. You cannot expect that contractors are going to open and close gates. You need to make alternative arrangements for temporary fencing, etc. Leasing of land for solar farm, in our case, is not a passive investment. Don't think you can just do this and then walk away. It's not going to happen. You've got to establish a really good working relationship with the O&M team, the operations and maintenance team. And again, they're there to ensure that the solar farm operates profitably for the owner. And that's fine, that's their job. But it's your job as an owner to make sure that you can also graze your sheep underneath. So it takes some time to establish this relationship, because generally the O&M people are have electricians, they've got skills in that field, but they're not into agriculture. It takes a while to get to work through things like issues with weeds and those sorts of things. We have been on this journey for 3 years, and I must admit that there's been some frustrations, but in general, it's worked out really well. We're very fortunate. Jen Tari, I think as you saw on one of the previous slides, manage this property, and we're working together really well to ensure that the agricultural side and the solar farm work together for the benefit of both parties. Thank you.
Wow, thanks, Gail. That's such valuable advice for people, and yeah, your insights will be really helpful for people when, you know, if they're in this situation, what they need to consider. And of particular note is, you know, protect your own interests the solar developers have their own interest in mind, but it's up to you to protect your own. So any questions that you might have for Gail, please pop them in the Q&A function down the bottom of the screen. And now I would like to introduce our planning expert, Michael Yutner. He is the Manager of Development, Approvals and Design, Renewables in the Department of Transport and Planning. Thanks, Michael, for joining us.
Thank you, and thanks for the introduction. I'd like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land where I'm joining you from. Probably before I start with my presentation, I just want to say thank you to all the speakers before me, and it's been great to hear everyone's views on things. And I'd also probably like to add some anecdotal commentary on that. And it was great hearing from you, Gail, but also from Nathan about this interaction between developers and landowners. And probably just my anecdotal experience, because I'm outside my swim lane now, but is just to say that some of the things we hear are about the way these negotiations have happened in the past sometimes, where it's all verbal, is not to be relied on. And what you really need to do is, if someone says something to you 10 years later, it's not what you remember them saying, it's what's written in the contract. And just to stress that, have those contracts looked at, have them reviewed, ask the proponent to pay for that legal review of them, and get a good lawyer to look at them if you can, not necessarily the same lawyer that does your wills. Somebody with a bit of planning and land use experience could be helpful. But that's way outside my swim lane, but it just sort of was on the tip of my tongue at the start of the presentation. So I'm from the Department of Transport and Planning, and in the development approvals team, and we have a team of about 8 people, which is focused on processing planning permit applications for energy projects. Majority of those are renewable energy projects and storage. Currently, we have 9 solar farms, 6 wind farms, 2 batteries, and 3 waste to energy facilities. It's about $8 billion worth of development if it gets up, and about 3 gigawatts of energy. Next slide, please. So the Minister for Planning, the Honourable Sonia Kilkenny, is the decision maker in all of this, and our team works in the department administering her applications, basically. So the Minister is the decision maker for all planning permit applications for energy generation and storage projects of 1 megawatt or more. So that'll be, anything apart from very small projects will be with the Minister. The smallest turbine is about 4 megawatts now. So even a 1 turbine wind farm will go to the Minister. Solar farms, batteries, gas-fired power stations, waste to energy, all of those projects will go to the Minister, but they effectively come to our team and we administer those permit applications on her behalf. New power lines, which connect generators to the existing network, hydrogen facilities, major transmission lines, and substations. Next slide, please. I've got a couple of slides about various technologies. I don't propose to go into these in depth, but the clause in the Victorian planning provisions, so your local planning scheme is 5313, which is for renewable energy facilities other than wind farms. There's 16 solar farms in Victoria currently operating and 86 approved, which are not yet operating. And these stats are changing all the time as projects are built and new projects are approved. Next slide, please. So batteries, they're really most often they're big shipping containers filled with racks and racks of like the little batteries that you have in your home. I'm oversimplifying it. Again, everyone knows this, but they charge when electricity is cheap and discharge when demand is high. We're seeing increasing numbers of applications for that for batteries across Victoria. Next slide, please. And wind farms, again, the minister is responsible for these, and the wind farms tend to attract the most community interest out of any projects we deal with. There's currently 35 in Victoria, and yeah, and just the thing about the capacity factor. Yeah, so they operate at about 30% of their nameplate capacity due to the flexibility of the wind source. Next slide, please. Look, I think the main reason I'm here is to talk about the new planning pathway for renewable energy projects. There was an amendment to the Victoria planning provisions, which is the local planning schemes across Victoria, on 4th of April 2024. And what that did was to update the clause 5322, which is significant economic development, so that was an existing clause, but it added renewable energy facilities and storage. And what that meant was, for these projects, objectors could no longer take decisions to VCAT, the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal. And also the Premier announced that there would be a faster processing time of up to 4 months, or an aim of 4 months. So we're starting to see projects rolling out through this new pathway. There was a lot of there was media and also political debate on this, which wasn't always factual. So what I'm trying to do here is to talk about the planning process, which is unchanged in most ways. So, and in a really quick summary, planning application is the same as a planning application if you were applying with your local council for a shed or something like that. But instead of going to the council, it goes to the minister. So the application's lodged, it's reviewed by the team I work with, and we'd request any further information if we needed it from the proponent. We would then send out referrals to any agencies as required, and seek inputs from other agencies, people like CFA on bushfire, aviation, CASA for aeroplane impacts from turbines, etc. And then we'd also give notice, and that was one of the things. There was confusion through some of the ways this was reported. So there is no change to how notice is given for planning applications. Notice is, they also call it advertising. So an application comes in, the department is responsible to put it on notice to all the neighbours and to the community, depending on how far the impacts might be. So that process is unchanged, and notice is still given. At the end of that, all the the views of the referral authorities and other agencies and council and neighbours, if they choose to make submissions, including objections, are all considered by the planner, who then assesses the project and puts forward a recommendation. And then the planning application is determined by either the minister or her delegate, and a decision is made. The difference is that prior to the change introduced on 4th of April this year, neighbours could then take matters to VCAT if they wanted to, so you could seek a review of that decision at VCAT, whereas now the change is that no longer is an available avenue. And that's consistent with what the government has done with other priority sectors, such as the big housing build, schools, some transport projects and other matters. Next slide, please. Another key part of what we do is to engage with traditional owners throughout the application process, and it's something that probably wasn't occurring until about 5 years ago, and it's not embedded in the statutory system, but it is a commitment that we've made as government, and that's what we've been doing. Next slide. There is a publicly available map. If you look up DTP and wind farms or renewable energy, there's a link to this page, which is a zoomable. You can zoom in and find where projects are. and that's publicly available. Just put in a plug for that. Next slide. So if we can go back one slide, I don't know if that's possible. The other thing I wanted to talk about was raised in Paul's submission was, and I'm going off topic here, so stop me, hosts, if need be. But they talk about the people not being able to build within 1 kilometre of a wind farm proposal, and that's something that does get raised from time to time, and it's certainly out there through, we receive correspondence about that. What I'd like to try and set the record straight with everyone is there's no prohibition on building anything within 1 kilometre of a wind farm, but there is a requirement to obtain a planning permit to build a house or accommodation within 1 kilometre of a wind farm. And there's a couple of factors or things to consider. One is that the rural zone, it's not a residential zone, it's a farming zone. And so the idea is that the key purpose of that is for farming, not for housing. The other thing to keep in mind is these farm blocks are very large blocks usually. So what this requirement for a permit is trying to do is to say, if there's going to be a wind farm there, it's not the best place to put your second house or your shearer's accommodation because it may be affected by noise. But if you go more than 1 kilometre from the boundary, you don't need a permit, most likely, or you may need a permit if it's a second house. But it's about trying to help you find a better siting option if you do decide to go for accommodation. So it's not a prohibition, and it doesn't affect any other land use or development proposal you might have other than those used for accommodation. So I just wanted to put that in there, but that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. That was terrific. And yeah, I can vouch for that GIS mapping. Like, that's a lot of fun. You can really drill down, zoom down to a granular level. So yeah, that's a very handy resource. Yeah, so thanks, Michael, for explaining the planning approvals process for renewable energy projects. And also the recent inclusion of renewables in the development facilitation pathway process and what that means for people. So thanks again, Michael. And now we're going to start our Q&A. So thank you, people, for popping questions into our Q&A function. The team's been busy in the background collating those questions. So what we've done, we've had similar questions, we've collated it into a single question to save on repetition and try to get to as many different topics as possible. So, sorry, I'm just going to grab my list of questions that have come up. Right, so Nathan, I think I've got a question that you might be able to answer, and if any of the other panelists feel like they have something to contribute, if you could provide your response after Nathan. But insurance is a bit of an issue at the moment. It's being debated. So Nathan, how will public liability insurance cover farmers for accidents that might impact neighbouring renewable energy developments or generation facilities, given that their value is so high?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. It's a really important question and something where I'm hearing from CUC members that are out there doing community engagement and engaging with landholders, and it's something that's coming back. So I think there's kind of two aspects to insurance. The first is around, does the existence of a project increase danger to their neighbours in terms of fire risk? And the international evidence of that is no, it doesn't. The Insurance Council of Australia says no, it doesn't, and that is because of the access roads that they build, the emergency planning that they do, the advancements in technology, coordinating with local fire brigades, and having monitoring of their facilities to see if anything is changing or any type of issues are emerging. So that the projects themselves are very safe and very well monitored. And then the other issue is what you spoke about there in terms of public liability of a landholder, where there is some type of liable act where they create a hazard or a fire and that damages the facility. And I think this is no different whether it is a renewable energy facility or another business that is neighbouring to you. It is the same. The Insurance Council of Australia has said that existing products provide enough cover for you. So if your public liability is $20 million, the insurance, which is a standard liability cover for landholders, the Insurance Council of Australia says that is enough. And that is because it is very unlikely for that liable act to result in 100% loss of any facility. For all of the reasons that I've just mentioned, the solar farm, the wind farm have very sophisticated monitoring. They have very advanced emergency management plans, and they're usually jumping onto issues well before they get, out of control or something like that. So yeah, really important that the existing cover that you likely already have as a landholder in public liability is sufficient. The Insurance Council says that it's currently sufficient.
Thanks, Nathan. In our resource pack, we will have a link to the Insurance Council's explanatory note so that you can read that for yourself. Thank you, Nathan. So next question. It can be hard for landholders to negotiate rates for leases when there is a lot of secrecy about going rates. Are there any standard going rates for solar farms and battery energy storage systems? I'm not sure who might be able to answer that for us.
I'm happy to have a go. The short answer is no, there's not, because these are commercial negotiations. It depends on what is the productive value of the land, where is the land located, how much is the land valued. So there isn't really a standard rate, and all of these are commercial negotiations between a landholder and a developer. So yeah, I see Jared's got his hand up.
Thanks, Nathan. Hi, everyone. It's Jared from the Office of the AEIC. One place where there may be standardised, in the sense that common across a development, is in the neighbourhood or neighbour payments. It's quite likely that a developer will be mindful of being consistent across the neighbours of a project.
Yeah.
But,
and also, benefit sharing is another one where there might be consistent, $1,000 kind of per megawatt benefits to the wider community and councils and things like that. So if you're seeing a project that's 300 megawatts, you can assume $300,000 will be available to local councils and local groups.
Gail, I'm just wondering if you had any experience or would like to make a comment on your negotiations with the as when the lease negotiations were happening.
As I said, Fiona, we had 4 people approach us within 6 weeks. And the only reason is because the farm is close to the Glenrowan terminal station. So that was the primary reason why they were all here knocking on your door. As I said in my notes, it's worthwhile taking your time. We engaged a consultant to do the consultation with the various companies, but let me say over 3 months it went from a very low level to quite a reasonable level of money. So there is an ability to negotiate. We are under a confidentiality clause, of course, so we don't reveal what it is, but we have in the past indicated to people who approach us that you can get it a little bit higher than that. So that's as far as we go.
Thanks, Gail. While I've got you here, I was just wondering how you went about finding a consultant, and you don't have to use the name of them, but how did you track them down? Like, what was it, a Google stalking? Or
in a previous life, I was general manager of a very large textile company that negotiated contracts with gas and electricity suppliers. So I went back and tapped him on the shoulder, being somebody who had been in the industry.
Thanks, Gail. The other aspect of getting advice is getting appropriate legal advice. So you need somebody who is experienced in the lease agreements or sale agreements with renewable energy developers. So we did contact the Legal Institute of Victoria for some advice, and they have a referral service. So in that resource pack, we have a link to their referral service so that you can track down appropriate legal advice, because yeah, you do need to get some savvy legal advice.
Yeah, that's correct. And I'm not, you know, as I think Michael said earlier, probably the local solicitor who does your will isn't the person that you require. You need to find someone who is well experienced in large commercial leases. You know, our lease agreement is, I won't say 50 mil thick, but it's pretty close.
Yeah, thanks, Gail. That's very valuable advice. Now, we've had a participant raise concerns about a proposed development that would impact his land, and asking what he can do to stop the developers accessing his land. So I might throw to Jared and Michael Yatner for an answer on that, if that's possible.
Fiona, I'm just looking up the question as we talk. I think the proposed developer of a generational storage project, as Nathan pointed out, has no right to access your land without negotiated agreement with you. So that would be the starting point for any consideration. And happy to follow up offline if the questioner wants to contact the office for further advice or direction.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. That's yeah, very good advice. If people have got any more questions, please pop them in the chat, and we'll continue to answer them. Would any of the panelists like to offer a comment or something that they would like to contribute to this question and answer session?
Yeah, no, it's Jared from the office of the AURC. I think just to reinforce the point there from the previous conversation, that it's better to fix an agreement up front rather than try and negotiate it later. So it's that time getting a landholder agreement right is really critical. I just thought it's very worth reinforcing that point.
Yeah, thank you, Jared. That's very important. And I think on Gail's slide, she had that at that development phase, you have much more influence than at the other stage. So if you're going to get things embedded in your agreement or things that you wish to happen later in the development and operation phase, you need to get it in your agreements early. So yeah, protect your interests that way.
Can I just follow up there, Fiona? That's just so critical, because once it goes to the development stage, once you get to the construction stage, that's your Bible. That will, you know, governs how things are set up, and you really don't have any power after that. You can't influence people after you've signed the document. So make sure you get it right the first time.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. Yeah, very important to have that document.
I'll just add to that projects don't exist until that option agreement with a landholder has been signed. So while developers are out there talking about projects, they legally only exist once that option has been signed. So yeah, really encourage landholders to slow down that process, seek the right advice, and yeah, all the power is with you in negotiating that agreement in the early stages.
Thank you, Nathan. That's very valuable. I might do a final question to Gail. Gail, there's been a lot of interest in your experience from the participants. If you could go back in time, what is the one thing you know now that you wish you'd known back then?
I think the one thing was really about getting things right first up. We sort of made an assumption that things like where would the gates go, or and they're just minor things, issues with weeds, those sorts of things. I wish we'd known a bit more up front, that we would have pushed those points earlier. We were very fortunate that we used an Australian company to negotiate or to do the development. I think that made it easier than trying to go with one of the internationals. But I mean, it was sometimes a very difficult process, but really, when you consider that you're dealing with a company that's developing a project of $170, $180 million, I'd have to say it went very smoothly. There were still some issues about contractors and being on site and not doing this or that, but in terms of the size of the project, it went really well.
Yeah, thank you, Gail. That's yeah, very valuable. So that brings our Q&A to an end. Thank you, everyone. If we haven't been able to get to your questions, we'll maybe we'll be able to sort of compile some answers post-webinar and share those. Yeah, we'll endeavour to find the answers and share those with you after the webinar. So what I'd like to let you know is that we have 2 slides that have all the links to key resources that we mentioned in the webinar, and that these will be available on the Energy Smart Farming website soon. So yeah, no need to hurriedly write them down or screenshot, but yes, we'll certainly make them available to you. And please do our quick survey before you leave. It's 4 questions. It will help us to plan future events. Yeah, it won't take you long, and we've got a link in the chat that you can use. Just click on that and take you straight to the survey, or if you're a QR code sort of person, we've got that on the slide on the screen for you. Recording and resources will be available on the Energy Smart Farming website soon. We will notify you by the email you registered with when this is ready. We're hoping sometime next week. I'd really like to thank all of our wonderful speakers, and as well as everyone who attended the webinar, making time to attend. Also, thank you for the incredible team that we have working behind the scenes to bring this webinar to you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much to our panelists who are so generous with their time and supported this idea that we had, that this information needed to be made available more widely. So thank you, everyone.